Welcome everybody to the final online broadcast day of the WREC. I can't believe we've already made it here with pretty much all of our teams locked for Barcelona. Now it's down to the seeding because yesterday we saw Team Queso eliminate Team Dark with a very strong performance. Andre with the MVP performance set up by the rest of his team, but Queso looking very strong at coming into today's matchup. Then we turned our attention to the upper bracket with WREC continuing their dominating style through the last chance qualifier. They are unbeaten so far, and a quick 2-0 over Formulation made sure that that record stayed the same. I don't know who's going to be able to beat them. We're looking forward to a showdown against Game Lord in Barcelona eventually, but we had one more spot to fill, and that was for the play-ins qualifier, and it was Talented Ones taking on the Unicorns of Love. And while it was a slightly different meta to what we were expecting, Unicorns looked very comfortable drafting the Senna, picking a Nasus up alongside it. They're going to have to see who their opponents are after today. Let's get our final broadcast day on the road.
Welcome to the official Riot Games Corporate EMEA Championship.
Everybody round, everybody round here, know we getting hype. Everybody round, 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 everybody round here, know we getting hype.
Welcome everybody. I can't believe it is the final online broadcast day. That feels very strange to say. It feels like we've only been doing this a couple of weeks, but I mean, it's been fun with so many games that we played nonetheless. I'm Stress, joined by Xscandrel and Stuart for our two best of threes of the day. And Xscandrel, you and I haven't cast together for a couple of weeks. You got 2 pentakills in the time that we haven't on the games you cast. I'm so jealous.
I know, the same guy as well, on the same champion. Jinx is a bit of a pentakill machine right now, especially if you manage to get a little bit of an early lead around some of these objective fights, and Doom showcasing why AD carries are in such a good spot with all those Storm Razor changes that happened on the last patch.
Yeah, and why WREC are in a position that they're unbeaten so far. We'll be checking in on WREC later today in our finals, but we've got to figure out who's going to get there first. As we have, take a look at the bracket, we can look at the teams vying for that spot in today's second best of 3. So it's going to be a long day for whoever wins the first matchup, and that's Formulation versus Team Queso. Stu, both of these teams have some pretty strong play styles for themselves, but like Queso yesterday with Andre looked so good.
Yeah, Queso looking really strong. Formulation kind of being dominated by WREC, as you can see by the upper bracket 2-0 in the end, but they're going to look to try and come back today with whoever team wins that first series will book their spot in the group stage in Barcelona as well, in the showdown, and WREC in the final, which is going to be very exciting.
Yeah, as said, it could be a long day for one of our teams today. It could also be a short day because WREC have been 2-0ing everyone, so who really knows, depending on how these games go. A lot on the board, potentially not as many games as yesterday. We had the potential for 9 games, only ended up having 6, but some very enjoyable games from yesterday's series nonetheless. Prediction game is always going to be one of those things that we look at coming right off of our schedule, and that's because I'm going to guess it's unanimous today. I don't know if anyone's gone Formulation. Ooh, Xscandrel, you've gone Formulation. I didn't see this to begin the day. How do you feel about Formulation today?
Yeah, I just think Formulation in general have looked more convincing to me than Team Queso. I think Team Queso, yesterday, I think that Team Dark are a good team, but they're not quite at the caliber of some of the other games that they've played. And Queso have come out with some wobbles, I think, here and there. I think, unfortunately, they have not looked as strong as they did in sort of Queso's gone past. And I think Formulation, on the other hand, have looked really good. I think from every series that I've seen them play in, I've been impressed with Formulation.
Yeah, that's fair. I think yesterday the struggles came a little bit just because of how good WREC are, right? It's like Snitch taking the Aurelia away, and it's just like, I'll crush you on this. It'll be an easy matchup. So as we get closer to our matchups, you're going to make me talk about myself? Okay, this is a bit of a surprise. Yeah, selfies, got to get them in before the game. Where's yours, Stu? Where's yours? Like, come on.
No selfies.
I can barely tweet once a week, let alone do a post about doing anything to do with my life. I'm such a boomer. I'm so bad at social media. But there we go.
I'm the same. It's not like it was my job for a while, and I was just like, oh, I'm terrible at interacting with that kind of thing. Stu, I know that you'll obviously have lots of opinions on our first game as we get closer to it. We're going to say goodbye to you for now, though, and get through some of our headlines for the first series of the day. I mean, before we get there, I think it's worth talking about what's on the line today. Of course, we have a lot of the teams locked already for Barcelona, but there's two main spots left. So the winner of the first series of the day is going to get a group stage spot. The loser will be playing against Unicorns in Barcelona for a play-ins spot. So still a little confusing, but all important win for this first series of the day between Team Queso and Formulation.
Yeah, it just eliminates another step that you've got to go through to ensure that you're in with a good fighting chance of doing well at those live finals in Barcelona. And specifically getting a direct line to the group stage is nice because you just have a little bit more security as you're heading into that phase of the tournament. So I think both teams will be pretty keen to make that them. But nonetheless, as you mentioned, everyone here is now going to Barcelona in some shape or form. So I'm sure a lot of the teams will feel happy with the end result regardless.
Yeah, I'm sure Queso will feel happy about that. Some, a version of a hometown advantage in a way, at least being on home soil with respect to them being a Spanish organization. When we look at the team that I think has played absolutely the best, head and shoulders in last chance qualifier, WREC. Yesterday, we saw them move from the AD carries towards, again, the AP carriers for Doom. So a little bit of a swap back, but like Sona Seraphine's still really strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, even with this particular clip here, you're seeing Snitch and Random playing AD carries in the solo lanes. So, it shows the flexibility of what I think the WREC roster is capable of. They can run very heavy AD topside and then compensate because Doom is flexible and can play those AP carries in the bot side of the map. But they can also equally put Doom on an AD carry and translate AP threats into other areas. But I think, what you saw this time around from WREC is very much kind of like the dominance of their solo lanes, supported by the strong AP carries in the bot lane.
I think it was such a good performance out of WREC. And for the first time in a while, we saw a team try and put a lot of attention towards Snitch. And it just didn't work. They had like 3 people mid for the first few minutes of the game. And Snitch was just like, I'm playing Graves. I will just push this lane out. And then you can't kill me. And I'll dash away. And got super far ahead. So it was really fun to hear from the interview from Snitch as well at the end of the day. Like, WREC feel like they've put in so much work in the practice that finally it started to show off. And I always have a lot of respect for any player that's just like, we scrim so much and finally we're seeing it in game. Because I think people underestimate when you're just watching how much time goes into preparing for a series.
Oh, absolutely. I think, these guys are playing nightly scrims versus top teams in Europe, ensuring that they're perfecting their drafts, ensuring that they're doing their best to play out certain comps that they've put together. A lot of time goes in before you even get onto the stage to make sure that you're well prepared. And I think WREC clearly have shown a growth from the main WREC stage where that finals versus Game Lord was a little underwhelming.
Yeah, it absolutely was. It was a moment where I think we had a lot of support for WREC because they kind of had peaked the week before. And then we were like, okay, WREC are going to come in. They're going to do a really good job against Game Lord. And I think they were disappointed with it as well. So I don't know. It's one of those things. Now I'm a little bit more on the hype train for WREC. The big question heading all the way towards Barcelona, we have quite a bit of a wait now. Is like, we won't have seen Game Lord play for like 6 to 8 weeks by the time we actually get there. So I think that's always the intriguing thing is like, how will they end up scrimming and have their competition? Because WREC have got a lot of reps in on this patch.
Oh, absolutely. I think, Game Lord as well, though, will be putting the time in clearly. I think that's one of the things that they've got going for them is they've got experience in both AP and AD carry metas. I think one of the questions that we had is, whether Redemption as a player was more suited to, the things like the traditional AD carry meta because he's generally been like a Corki or an AP carry player. But I think he's a brilliant player in his own right, and I think Game Lord are going to be able to adapt just as well as WREC have, and I'm really hoping for that matchup to be in a meta because obviously there's, as you mentioned, a long time between now and when we actually get to that stage where these two teams are going to be comparable, and maybe when we see that sort of rivalry revisited, pending no other intrusions from other challengers, if we see that rivalry revisited, then I think we're hopefully looking for a closer series and a closer game.
Yeah, I think so as well. Speaking of close series, I think our first series today is going to be quite a close one. I think Stuart agrees with me as well on that. Let's head over to Stuart for his key points.
Thank you very much, Stress. Yes, Formulation against Team Queso. These two teams did play against each other as well in the WREC. It was actually Formulation who came out on top and knocked out Team Queso. And in that series, Formulation were on the front foot, and they need to continue to be on the front foot as well. But on the other hand, they need to be a little bit careful, because against WREC, they were on the front foot. They were trying to play this team fight composition where they kept on fighting and fighting, but WREC just outdone them in the macro games. They need to be a little bit careful. And it's all about shutting down Andreas. It's really hard to do so, but against Team Queso before Formulation, we're targeting so many bans towards Andreas, targeting invades as well towards Andreas. So it's really important to make sure for Formulation that they try and shut down Andreas as much as possible. And this is kind of a revenge match for Team Queso, because as I mentioned, Team Queso were the ones that got knocked out of the WREC, and it was Formulation who knocked them out as well. So even though both these teams have locked their spot in Barcelona, there's still a lot to play for, because as Xscandal said, if you get to that group stage, there's just one more phase that you kind of skip in a way with that playing stage. So I'm sure both these teams do not want to play Unicorns of Love, because they did look really, really strong as well yesterday. So exciting series to come up. The last series was super close between these two. It's going to be a good one. Back to Stress and Xscandal.
Thank you, Stuart. We've sped run the intro to the show, so I think we need a couple of more minutes before we're ready for our champion select for game one. So I think it's worth us diving a little bit into the meta. We've had a lot of games now on 3.1, a few games with Karma and Shen available. Are there any picks that we haven't seen that you're kind of expecting with the changes we had on that huge patch?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was expecting to see some more Shen. I think he was probably a pick. Apologies if you can hear my dogs in the background; they are going mental. I think Shen was a pick that traditionally I was expecting to see more of. I think a lot of teams reported from scrims that they were expecting to see a little bit more Shen overall, and I think he's got that cross map presence. He can influence first team fight objectives really well. He hasn't really been as much in terms of presence as I was thinking. The first series on Friday he got banned, but apart from that, not really touched much on Shen. I think one of the things that Shen lacks is this ability to wave clear, this ability to push waves in the late game. And even though you have that cross-map capability, you're still there desperately trying to stave off waves that plenty of other Baron laners can shove into you like 60 times more quickly. So I think Shen in general is just struggling in terms of his side lane presence. And even though he can join team fights, and even though he can make cross-map plays, the value that those bring clearly aren't outweighing the ability to have someone who's a strong split pusher and can offer multiple forms of win conditions, I think.
Yeah, I remember you saying, I think it was on our Thursday broadcast, and you and I originally come from League of Legends PC. Obviously, you've done a whole lot of mobile stuff in your career. The difference between Shen in Wild Rift is like the itemization doesn't allow him to push the lanes back out like it did in PC, right? It's like in PC you had Titanic Hydra that allowed you to push out, and you could play him in a support role. And there were a few different ways that you could make him work, but in Wild Rift, I think like those matchups just don't work in his favor right now in the meta. It seems to be that's what Hells and yourself were talking about, is like individually in lane he's not strong enough, and then what he offers from his ultimate is not quite as strong as you would expect it to be. Is that the vibe that I'm getting on the pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think also you need to take into account that the size of the Wild Rift map is smaller than PC.
Right.
So actually, in real terms, let's say you have a Camille and Baron lane, you want to rotate her down for an objective. The real term rotation time is like 15 to 20 seconds. And a lot of the time you can dance around and wait for Camille to get there before, influencing. So that immediate snap engage, I think there is a limited time frame in the early game where that proves useful, especially, around first Dragons and first Rift Heralds. But as the game progresses and the need for really, really good wave management, really, really good wave clearing, it becomes more apparent. And the fact that the Shen ultimate can get burst, the shield can get burst through so quickly, especially with how bursty Wild Rift is right now, and how burst heavy the meta is. I think it's one of those things that it just isn't providing enough value in the late game for it to be something that a lot of people are wanting to pick up. And as you correctly mentioned, Stress, his actual individual matchups aren't that great outside of maybe some level 1 cheese that you can pull off. So it's just a little awkward for Shen right now. I think he needs some numbers buffing to sort of make him feel really valuable.
We'll see whether he ends up getting picked today. We're not really expecting it. But speaking of cheese, of course, Team Queso are one of the teams loading into today. They're going to be, I believe, on our red side for game number 1, or at least how it's listed here. Acolyte, Andres, Veos, Joey, Skaggs, and Methanaut. For formulation, it's UI, Kimao, Don, Feko, and Zawa. And I think there are some pretty standout players on both sides of this. I think Andre, everything from Queso's game plan puts resources towards Andre. I think it's a really blatant and obvious playstyle, but not in a bad way, because Queso just come in and they say, we know what we're playing, we're going to play it, and you have to unseat us. We're not going to play to your style. And I like when teams do that. I feel like it's a really strong way of setting yourself up for a series like this.
I agree, and I think also, this match feels like about as close to 50-50 as you can really get with the way that these teams have been playing. And I think one of the things that as you mentioned, Queso do really well is they play towards Andre. Andre's kind of expected to be the person that puts Queso on his shoulders, and a lot of the picks that they draft are there to facilitate Andre for the most part. I think Veos has shown a proficiency on assassins, but has maybe had some questions levied as to whether he can play a more comfortable role outside of that. And I think when you look at formulation, there is some questions about whether they're 2-1 dynamic. There is some questions about whether if they don't get their draft, are they good enough to compete? And I think that's what you're really going to see come through in this series. Are Queso, able to activate some of the other strong win conditions they have, or are they going to rely on Andre to be that man? And if formulation aren't able to get these picks that have allowed them to shine, are they capable of dancing with the likes of Queso and WREC? And obviously versus WREC, that was shown that they weren't. So now they've got to answer that question again for Queso.
And I feel like that's a great point. Is like originally we were building in with like a lot of the Irelia mid pick, and Irelia isn't just a Dawn pick. We've seen other people play it. I feel like formulation, when they have that comp, as you alluded to, they look great. They look really comfortable. But outside of that, it feels like a little bit of a liability. Even though we've seen them play many different types of champions, formulation I think have been one of the more unique play style teams when they pick different things in the bottom lane. I don't know that the strength has been there against the top teams, and that's where they're going to have to figure that out against Queso, because Queso have started to look better against our top teams. I think we're just about ready to head towards our first draft of the day. So I think some picks that we have to highlight are going to be taken away. Karma, we're expecting to be banned in just about every game. I think we saw one on Thursday, and then everyone was just like, nope, no more Karma. Ban that. Like, Gragas is out of here, Karma's out of here. Get rid of some of these mages.
Yeah, Karma is almost the polar opposite of Shed in terms of the way that she came out. She had some really... by the way, I do love the changes that Karma has had. I think that they've made her a much more interesting champion to play compared to her PC counterpart. I thought her PC, version was... Look, I haven't played PC in a while. I don't know whether Karma's...
It's not interactive.
Yeah.
It does everything.
Exactly, and I think also like the bland. It was very bland. Like I think that the overall the kit that Karma had was bland. So the Wild Rift kit that came out, it felt great. It felt there was a lot of thought that had gone into it. It made Karma much more interactive. But on the flip side, it kind of gave her a lot. It's given her a lot of stuff, and that stuff is quite difficult to deal with, and also that stuff also really hurts, and also she's very flexible and can be played in multiple roles. So I think even from a competitive standpoint, people have seen Karma and said, okay, this champion offers a lot and also does a lot of damage and also is really flexible, and she's like a no-brainer pick for most compositions. I mean, we saw how Clue played it, even though he fluffed 50% of his ultimates. The ones that hit were so impactful that they set Doom up for pentakills. So it's just Karma's really good in a really, really good spot right now. So I don't blame people for putting it on the ban cards, as well as Gragas, for the same reasons, mostly because his AP build buff is ludicrously strong, does way too much damage, and also he's just so flexible.
Yeah, very flexible. I mean, we saw Veos play it in one game. I think that's one of the champions that Veos has brought that I say isn't an assassin. AP Gragas is still an assassin. Like you body slam ult somebody and they die, like no problems. So those are two picks that we're expecting to be banned from the ban phase. We're heading very shortly to the picks and bans phase. I swear, I'm not just teasing everybody that we're getting there. We are getting our players just about ready. A couple of other things that we should note: Master Yi and Yuumi, and I believe Zed are disabled globally for this, so they won't appear in the ban phase either. Although we did have a team ban Zed the other day, and I was like, well, that's a wasted ban. There's just a few issues with patch 3.1 from what we're aware of. So if you're wondering why are people not first picking Master Yi like they do in solo queue, that's it. Also, please don't first pick Master Yi that much. I ban Master Yi all the time. Every game.
Every game.
Mostly because of my own team. I don't want to play with that. Like, the number of Master Yi's that feed.
I ban it for the enemy team because I'm sick of Master Yi having better isolation damage than Kha'Zix right now. And to be fair, I'm not entirely sure that there was some questions about whether Master Yi was bugged or not, but regardless, whatever state he's in is just too good. And definitely needs some things looked at. He's got the quickest, like, clear speed in the game right now, which is something to say because Master Yi's never really had that kind of attribute given to him. So he's very, very strong. I don't know about Yuumi, but I know Zed is actually an issue with him stacking Conqueror on his Shadow Slash. So basically, Shadow Slash wasn't stacking Conqueror, and so it was actually a negative effect for Zed, but enough that it's not ideal to have him played right now. So there's a couple of things I don't know what happened with Yuumi. No one cares about Yuumi.
I mean, for Queso, I was saying this yesterday. For Queso, I think as they're one of the teams that opted into like the Yuumi Olaf, I think it not being available isn't significant, but it's one thing that they can't lean on. I believe it's something to do with the cooldown on ability too, with jumping to people. But that being said, this is not official confirmation of that. You should never take that from esports casters.
We are just riffing, mate. We are just riffing at this point.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm just waiting to see what goes. I mean, Veos yesterday. So to focus back in on the teams a little bit, high priority on the Akali. You mentioned Assassins. Like they were first picking it on Red's side in yesterday's series. It looked really good. I think, we've seen the Ziggs drop off a little bit, but seen it still picked up. So there are still a lot of picks like the Camille that even with nerfs over the last few patches, they're first pickable and the teams will opt into it every time.
Yeah, I mean, Divine Sunder did a good job of bringing back champions that have been taking a couple of nerfs over a few patches. What I found hilarious was that the 10 base damage nerf to lunge was going to be enough to offset how much power Fiora gained for this patch. But nonetheless, there have been a lot of changes to champions, a lot of changes to the meta, mostly through itemization changes. And I think the Divine Sunder change has just completely reshaped how we look at Baron lane. Partly reshaped how we think about the jungle as well, with things like Zhen Zhao creeping back into power. Like I've seen a lot of people bringing back Wukong Black, Divine Sunder and Black Cleaver as well is super strong. So there's been a significant number of changes just based on meta changes at all.
Yeah, there have been quite a few. We haven't seen as much Hullbreaker as we were expecting, but we've seen picks that can play towards it. We've seen a lot of the Graves and that kind of thing. I believe we are having a little bit of an issue with our teams getting ready into the picks and bans. Unfortunately, that does mean we have to go for a short break. I'm sorry that I said we were getting closer to picks and bans and we weren't there. So we just need to head off for just a few minutes to get our teams ready for this game. When we come back, we will jump into game 1 of the day.
ready?
Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully we'll be ready for game one very shortly. I know some of the teams are just having a couple of issues with getting things sorted before we get into game. That means you are kind of stuck with us talking. I'm seeing picks and pans come up on screen, so I'm assuming that's a good thing and that we're getting right into it. As we've talked a lot about what we're expecting to see. I think there's not likely to be too many surprises coming from this first draft. I mean, Karma, Gragas, likely to be banned on that red side. Then blue side get a lot of flexibility on it. I don't really want to see a lot of Corki. I don't know how you feel about it, Scoundrel, but me and Hells are boring, bored by Corki at this point.
I find Corki a bit annoying to have to watch. He's I much prefer to see sort of the newer things coming through. Yeah.
Your dogs hate Corki as well. I mentioned Corki and they go crazy.
My dogs have got like major separation anxiety from my wife, so whenever they're not in the same room as my wife, they are just there going, ooh, 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 and they're not in the same room as my wife right now. So that's
my
basically
cats
why.
get that.
Yeah,
this is the nobody told us this about the pandemic, but 2 years of like spending every moment with your pets gives them separation anxiety. It's really strange.
Yeah, I've got two. My older one's not so bothered, but my little one, my small black cockapoo, literally cannot be away from my wife. Just every time bursts out into like whining if he's even remotely separated, which is both very sweet, but also very annoying.
Especially when you're trying to go through a draft, right? Because
Jackson
Olaf banned out by formulation. Again, every time we see Andre in a matchup, there's like 7 jungle bans, I swear. And that's happening from formulation side. Now banning out that Akali. Gragas, the only one we haven't really mentioned, is still available, but that Aurelia taken off the board, so formulation won't have access to that.
My impression is that we're like, okay, it's going to be Camille. So Gragas is the first pick. It's a very obvious one.
Yep.
I was going to mention that Gragas would be the final ban on red side, but that's not going to be the case here for Queso. So they're going to let Gragas go that way. This makes like Joey Skaggs as a Vayne, pick up a little more awkward because Gragas is a really nice answer into Vayne a lot of the times. So if Joey did want to go down the traditional AD method, then obviously the Vayne doesn't sound as appealing as it previously did. But we will see the Galio locked in here, which is a very classic Queso pick and always has been, was something that was very, very influential in their Origin Series win last year. And we're going to see the prioritization on Galio very early on in the draft. And the Galio Wukong, it's like budget Galio Camille, if I'm honest with you.
It is.
So it does the same thing.
We've seen a few teams picking up the Wukong a little bit more recently. What I would say about the Joey point is we're all waiting for Joey to pick up the likes of Vayne and the 80 carries, but every time Queso have the opportunity to draft around Andre, they do. So Joey goes, right, I'll just play Mage. I'll just play something that can facilitate and support. And Queso have looked so good that until they need to do it, I'm not too bothered by it, but we know that they have it there. That's a very early Leona pickup. That is crazy early compared when you have Rakan still available, Thresh still available. Like, these big supports are there.
Yeah, that's something that Zhao has liked as well, because it gives you some sort of this immediate engage potential. It's a nice follow-up with Xin Zhao as well. I think someone was educating me how to say Xin Zhao's name properly. I think it's Xin Zhao. But anyway, regardless, with Xin getting locked in here, then I think it's a double whammy engage potential. It also makes it easier for the Xin to follow up on the engage, and then obviously Gragas adds a little extra. He has his own follow-up engage, also has that isolation potential. One of the things that works well is the Gragas Leona combo. You can knock someone away, you can lock them up, and it makes it very difficult for them to escape. But I agree with you. The prioritization on the Leona very early on in this draft will either be, in my eyes, predictive in terms of they're predicting what Team Queso might want to do to round out this comp and think that Leona is going to be the answer to undo that, or they see something in Leona that a lot of the other pro teams don't, which is that she is in a better spot than a lot of people would otherwise believe.
We'll see where Zhao ends up, having that impact with the Xin Zhao. That obviously does give quite a lot of single target burst potential when you're starting fights. With the Corki lock-in from Queso, no surprise to see their attention stay on the bottom lane for the bans here as well. Removing the Varus, we might see them remove Ziggs, although we have seen teams start to drop that priority. Ever since we started seeing the Locket come out a lot more from supports and just say, we can just absorb the Ziggs damage in the beginning of the fight, and he doesn't quite do so much.
Yeah, the locket was something that I really was impressed with, sort of people bringing it back into the meta, because I think since it had that cost increase, people were like 300 gold for locket, and it got a little nerf. Like, I'd rather spend that 300 gold elsewhere, but it still does have its value, and you could see that value like quite heavily on display in some of the games that we've had. But of course, it's all about where you believe your enchants are going to be useful, and Redemption in general has a lot more flexibility in terms of how you use it compared to Locket, which is why a lot of people kind of backed off towards that Redemption sort of pathway for the majority of supports. But we have bans coming through. It is the Yasuo and the Graves ban here. Yasuo Wukong is a pretty solid combo, pretty disgusting combo as well. So, no surprises that we're going to see the Yasuo ban here. The Graves is an interesting one. Maybe believing that this is a Wukong Baron lane, or that Acolyte has been playing Graves Baron lane himself, because otherwise, you're just making some assumptions about where that Wukong could be going Baron lane then, because we have a Kha'Zix lock-in.
Yeah, we saw it. Weirdly, it was when Clamaras came into the lineup for Control that first picked the Wukong. Whether that means it's just been played in scrims a lot by teams in Baron lane. We've been seeing that Wukong go up to the Baron lane, have the presence in team fights, because there aren't, from what we've seen in competitive games, there aren't too many lanes that can actually take Wukong out and remove him from the lane and give him too much trouble. So he generally gets the team fight decently. Kha'Zix, no surprise from Andre. And I think the Graves ban as well is because we've also seen it flex between Baron, jungle, and mid. So like the flexibility on pick 4 from Queso would allow them just too much room going into the last pick of the draft. So take that off the board, pick up the Ziggs for yourself. Bottom lane, it's going to be fair. Although I don't know how I like Ziggs Leona, if I'm being completely honest. I think they do two separate things, at least in the lane.
Yeah, I think realistically, Ziggs is going to give you all the lane presence that you need in terms of just lane push and lane shove. And Leona kind of it harks back to Afromu a little bit in terms of his very famous Leona tutorial, where it's just about having presence, baby. And it's about just establishing yourself in the lane. Leona always does that, right? Leona always establishes herself in the lane, and so it's when you're playing something like Leona, you have to respect that engaged potential, even with the Ziggs, because her lockdown and her ability to set up her whatever is in the dragon lane with her is almost unparalleled, in terms of what she can do in that sense. So, I think it's fine, and I think Ziggs in general can pair up with pretty much anything, because Ziggs does what he needs to do in the dragon lane by himself. So you just shove whoever you want to with him that makes the best sense for your comp. And for FMG, they're all in. This is an all-in comp. Like every single one of these picks, apart from Ziggs, is designed to throw their bodies into the line to make something major happen. My only worry is you're playing that directly into a Wukong Galio, where suddenly it becomes a lot easier for Wukong and Galio to get massive value out of their skills. And that's where you're going to be a little careful, I think, for formulation gaming.
Yeah, that's a fair point. This Garen likely to be going in the mid lane here, as we've kind of talked about the Wukong interaction. I think Queso in this situation, had they been able to pick Darius, would have been just rubbing their hands at a Darius pick at 4 people that want to jump towards you. But Garen kind of does a similar thing. Like he's going to be able to spin at least to get a potential execute. That Leona as well, I want to watch how Zhao roams. I think that's the key thing. You mentioned how Ziggs is self-sufficient in lane. That means, okay, where's Zhao's impact on the rest of the map? Can they utilize that Xin Shao and the Leona combination, get early picks and get themselves rolling? A bit of a different composition out of Team K. So I think there's less when it comes to putting priority towards Andre. Yes, he's got the Kha'Zix, but it's not quite as straightforward as we've seen. And as we head on to the Rift for game number 1 between Formulation and Team Queso, there is so much on the line in this matchup. I mean, both of these teams want to be going directly to that group stage. Both of them do not want to have to play in the play-ins. Unicorns looked a little bit different with their strategy yesterday. They brought some stuff that we weren't particularly expecting out of Europe, but both of these teams have pretty clear identities this time around. It is Formulation looking for that all-in play style. Team Queso, a little different, to be honest. I said they had a clear identity. I'm not so sure on this one. I think it's a little different from what I had expected from Team Queso's lineup.
Yeah, I think Team Queso, they aren't looking to sort of throw everything at throw everything in the kitchen sink at these team fight situations. Like they have that capability. In fact, I almost think they have the necessity to play peel back a little further, sort of allow Formulation to come to them and then navigate the space that you're setting both Joey and Andre up for success. Vejos, Acolyte, and Methanaut here are all essentially facilitating Andre and Joey in these fights. So it's about how you apply that Wukong ultimate to stop Andre being targeted, how you apply that Galio taunt to allow Joey the space to play from the back line.
One thing I want to note really early on, and look at the 3 wards that have been placed by Formulation, like really early priority to try and spot Andre. We don't see teams commit this much early on from what I normally have seen from game. Like this feels like a big investment to spot him out.
Yeah, I think they were trying to get eyes on which scuttle he was going to go to straight away. I think they're just trying to utilize the fact that they've got strong botline presence. We have a Roam.
Yeah, Roam comes through. They get the stun. Now you got to try and burn through the health bar of Veos. He's kiting towards Andre, who's on the blue buff right now. Flash comes over. That's going to actually disrupt Andre's path here, and Andre now gets caught by Kimao. They're trying to buy time for Methanol to get their Veos no flash because he's already used it. Taunt doesn't quite save the jungle, or I should say the mid lane here, as Methanol now jumped on, as finally Andre is able to trade one back in exchange for Team Queso. Now, however, Acolyte is desperately trying to get him away, flashes out over the wall after using the clone, but a good start from Formulation, all coming from some of that vision control, and then the roam from Leona.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think you can set the story up really nicely when you talked about the vision control. It unlocked Zawa to walk with Kimao towards that bottom scuttle. The intention was to then translate that into a blue buff invade, but then they saw an opportunity to get onto Vejos in the mid lane. This was the very end of the fight, and I think Vejos, this moment here, where he tries to turn around and peel back towards Andre, is kind of what set his team up for failure. I think Vejos, unfortunately, wasn't quite on the same page as to what Andre wanted to do. I think Andre was hoping to Vejos to split them up a little bit more and, hope that one of them would at least come towards him in isolation in the Rift Herald pit, and one obviously would chase them towards Methanol. But I think Vejos just slight error in the way that he approached the end of that fight there. But nonetheless, I think you set the story up nicely. It was a really beautiful display of how early vision control can give you all the information that you need to make the correct decision around some of these roams. And that's exactly what they did here with Zawa. They allowed him to unlock and go towards the mid lane and set up a very early start here. Good early start for Formulation Gaming.
Yeah, it is exactly what Formulation need. And then we just watched a little bit bot lane, how Veos, I don't think he was expecting both Fekko and Zawa to be in the lane, so takes half of his health. Of course, Garen will heal that up. He uses the honey fruit as well. But Formulation had not done the swap to mid lane yet. They're in progress of doing it, although Fekko did just cancel his recall. So we'll have to see whether they can get there in time for these first objectives of the game. Gragas has decent wave clear as it is, so it's not too much of a problem, but you can see Veos and Fekko still trading down in that bottom lane. Garen, not this early on in the game when it comes to surviving through a lot of the poke that comes down. Needs a little bit more time before he's strong enough to just sit there.
Yeah, but he still has that passive, so regardless of what happens, he can kind of get out of combat and start to regen HP to a silly amount. He also wanted to ensure that he was able to hit this Black Cleaver spike before this first objective. You can see that Kimao near going to get taunted up.
Ooh, good taunt. Zigzalt's going to dissuade the rest of the fight, though, and Formulation forced to use 3 ultimates in total there against Queso, only using the Kha'Zix's ultimate for themselves.
Yeah, they just found a good opportunity to get in, and I think at this point, Formulation know that they are out of position. They're a little bit ousted when it comes to the dragons. They're not going to be able to compete for that. They're going to go immediately for this river.
Ooh, Acolyte Cyclone already to start this off. The Galio ultimate doesn't quite continue the fight in place, but they're able to move through the jungle, and Queso are bouncing back from what was a rough start to the game. This Rift Herald's going to reset, but they should be able to take it right off the end of that fight.
Yeah, no, really, really good stuff, I think, from Team Queso there. I do think that it was a little hopeful for Formulation to be able to just rotate in plain sight over towards the Rift Herald and hope they can get away with it. I don't think you do. Regardless of how strong your comp is, Rift Herald is very gated by how quickly the eye opens. And so you can never really 100% rush it down the same way that you can with a dragon. And I think for that sense, that Formulation got a little bit ahead of themselves in terms of planning their engage on the Rift Herald. And I think a good rotation as well coming out from Joey and Methanol, as well as Acolyte, to ensure that they weren't able to get that for free. Joey also really aggressively using that package just to make sure he can get that kill onto Kimao. But speaking of, he's going for the Essence Reaver build too.
We might be having the reverse happen here. There was Formulation, the ults are back available, the eye open, but wow, Kimao just gets melted down. Suplex comes through. Have they been able to steal it? Because Andre was killed. It's stolen by Leona. Azawa has made the Leona pick work. The execute is not quite enough as Fekko gets the honey fruit, and it's a triple kill coming through from UI off screen. That is a huge team fight from Formulation. Now Rift Herald popped in the middle lane. They'll be able to push it down, and I hope we can get a replay of what happened on the other side of that fight, because UI went monstrous in that.
Yeah, absolutely did. They will get the first turret of the game here for free. Whether Acolyte can respond and get the bot lane tier 1, we'll have to see. We already have Kemal coming down to protect it, and I think Acolyte is willing to give up his life for this.
He's like, I'm just going to take it. Doesn't matter. Yeah, and going to drop for this is Acolyte's going to try and get his way out. One Cyclone charge used, has the flash available, so we'll commit the ultimate. They know there's no neutral objective, so it's just a case of waiting, and they get the kill onto Kamau as well. Andre, he does not want to get pushed out of the enemy jungle at any point here. This is the fight.
Let's take a look at this again then. As you mentioned, Joey's a little out of position here. Zawa gets a beautiful ulti in combination with UI. I mean, it was just layered skills that worked so nicely. Joey then previously just not able to escape. I think Don uses the Don had his ultimate available there. I think without the Wukong in these fights, the CC needed to give the space to Andre and Joey, like we said before, isn't there. And I really think that that is something that Queso are going to have to be a little conscious of as this game progresses. You really do need Acolyte in your fights, because otherwise it's way too easy for the multiple engagement methods that Formulation have got to be able to use to get onto Andre, to get onto Joey, and effectively neuter the main damage sources that you have in some of these team fight situations. So definitely think that, you know, Queso need to not undervalue what Wukong provides to the fights for them. And I think try to ensure that when they're coming to these next objectives that they are playing with having Acolyte there in mind.
This is as close of an early game as we've had. Back and forth fights, basically even gold. The objectives have gone split between the two. That's a great sweeper. Is going to spot out the attempted engage from Team Queso. Joey's in a lot of trouble with two people stuck on him. Survives a whole lot longer perhaps than he should have, as Formulation have found one on the backside for themselves. And again, it's blow for blow on these engages. Now Veos is the one caught. He's spinning, doesn't have his flash available. Double kill now as Kimau wants to be the carry jungler in this game. It's 7 kills to 6. The gold is pretty much even. There was a tower taken by Queso during that engage too.
Yeah, they still let Acolyte sit on the bottom side of the map here, and I think just a nice little play from both teams. Like, we're trying to set something up around that top side, sort of tri-brush area, or not tri-brush area, sort of the blue side tri-brush, like I'd say. And unfortunately, they just were caught out by that sweeper. They must have had some inclination that they had made their way into that blue side jungle, and essentially they tried to sack Don for Joey at this point. The rest of the team Queso said, well, Joey, you're dead, so we're going to try and get something from it. And then Vejos, unfortunately, stuck behind no man's land. We have another fight around this objective.
Right back into it. Joey packages over the wall, but doesn't connect anyone with the damage or the knockup. The suplex back into Queso is going to deal damage, but Queso already picked up the kill onto UI. That should open up the dragon for them, as Andre has already taken it down. 5 versus 4 means Formulation have to play a little bit careful around this mid tower, but without the Rift Herald, it's going to be a tough one to break through that 6.
Look how different these fights play out, though, when Acolyte is actually there to apply the team-wide CC. It just, again, allows Andre and Joey a little bit more space to do what they need to do in these team fight situations. Like, Andre can look for a couple of cues here and there, a couple of taste their fears to get the damage down. And I think Joey feels a little bit more free to make those plays where you can try and zone Ziggs out the fight by yourself, because you know that Acolyte is providing that interruptive, sort of disruptive team fight tool that is allowing you to do that. So I think, just again, as another example of why Acolyte, I think, is so important to this comp, and how, relying on him as a split pusher, I think, is the wrong way to play right now for Team Queso.
Yeah, it really is more about grouping on this these team fights coming up. And I noticed Formulation, they seem so much more free, and this makes sense when their ultimates are available. It's when they're caught with 1 or 2 just not there that Queso are able to fight. Now they're going to go in. All the ults are up. Methanaut caught by the Solar Flare does slow him in place as he's forced to back away. Not a lot of damage stuck down, though, onto Queso as yet. And look at the damage in response. That's a good Ziggs ultimate, though, is going to basically call an end to this fight. As Rift Herald has spawned, Formulation are going to look for it. Veos has a wild flank on this, but he's also isolated on the backline by himself. They have an inkling that he's there, and he's had to kind of run around and find himself back amongst his team. So interesting play to set up this fight, as now they're going to go in. There's the Cyclone. They found damage down onto Fekko. Fekko's already out of this when the fight continues on the backside as Joey's forced to stasis. UI is holding 3 members of Team Queso all in that top side jungle, but now it's going to be Rift Herald that was taken before the fight even started. Going to push through on that middle lane as they're trying to chase down Formulation through the lower side. They've routed them through back to their base, and they're looking to take more from this, as that's a kill for Veos. Can they get Zawa as well? This is where Andre shines on these isolated fights, but Zawa, Solar Flare buys him enough time to back himself away.
I think one of the things that I really can sum this fight up, and the only thing that you really need to have paid attention to before we go into that fight was how many green dots you could see on either side of our rosters. Before that fight kicked off, I think there was one available ultimate for formulation. I think everything else had been used in the build-up to that fight. Whereas on Team Queso, you can see here, only UI's ultimate was available here. Everything else was used as a way of deterring Team Queso from this fight. And Team Queso, they had everything available, pretty much, apart from, I think, what was the Kha'Zix ultimate to hand, because he used that in the middle of that last fight. And, I think people got to remember the value of these ultimates and the value of what they're doing in terms of how they play through these team fights. It wasn't enough. There wasn't enough important skills left for formulation, and I think Team Queso knew that even though they took a bit of damage in the build-up to that fight, they still had everything, every tool that they needed to ensure that they would be able to navigate that fight properly. And I think, again, I don't want to keep harping back to it, but you can just see how impactful Wukong Ultimate is when he's actually there and ready to engage these fights.
Yeah, it's having big impact, and Andre forced to leap away, but that's a pretty short cooldown, so able to utilize the mobility well. I mean, Veus is pushing topside, doesn't have teleport available, has a redemption for these fights, so just going to push through the top lane, get as much damage onto this tower. We'll see whether he can actually take it, as Don could ult the wave if he wanted to, but just going to clear it with the Q, or I should say ability 1, to be able to clear those minions out. Baron's about to spawn, so is Dragon, so I'm going to pass my eyes back over to those ultimates, all 10 available. And it's formulations that are the most important, right? Because Corkis we don't care about, Kha'Zix we don't particularly care about. It's like formulations and then the Cyclone.
Yeah, and I think, for both teams, it's about the way they're using them as well. I've seen Methanol popping his stone plate early on in a team fight, especially versus Set. I'm like, gotta be a little careful. We've seen how that's played out before. You just need to be so careful about it. It's very execution based right now, but it is the Inferno. It does go the way. Yeah,
Dragon's already down, and so is one of the members of Formulation. As into the back line goes Veus on this Garen. They picked it last, and they've been able to pick up a double kill as well for Acolyte. Formulation seem to have fallen apart around this team fight. That's a clean ace to end that fight. 15 kills to 7. Queso looking to push down mid. They may very well end it here with 20-second death timers.
I think this is going to be all she wrote for the first game of the series here. Team Queso looking incredibly strong. I mean, I really thought Formulation would have more to give, especially with Kimao and his Zinzao, but not quite able to make it work. And it's Team Queso that secured the first game of the series.
Queso picking up a win and doing it in a fashion that is a little different from what we were expecting. Like, sure, Andre still was on a carry. They still had damage coming from that Kha'Zix, but like, this wasn't the play everything towards Andre's style that we've come to know from Queso. This is just a little bit more of a standard brawl it out around neutral objectives and just try and team fight and skirmish your way to win. That, I mean, a lot of the teams play that play style, and looks like Queso can do it as well when they need to.
I think, again, one of the things that I think Queso did really nicely, actually one of the things that Formulation almost played into, maybe not intentionally, but something that definitely happened in terms of draft, was just how good Wukong and Galio are versus heavy melee engaged comps. Every single player, apart from Fico, wants to be in the middle of the fight, hitting you with their fists. And that's exactly what Wukong and exactly what Galio want, because that's where they get the most value out of their skills. And I think, for Team Queso, all they needed to do was play the Wukong ultimate correctly, play the Galio ultimate correctly, and you were in a situation like right here, like you can't, like they can't get into the fight. There's no way. UI tries to with his ultimate, but still they're struggling to get to that choke point because that Wukong ultimate, it makes it just so difficult for them to do so. And in this scenario here, you can see, look at Formulation. They're split, they're broken, they don't know exactly where they want to be because they can't navigate past the impact of those huge knockups and those huge taunts that they have to deal with because they've got so many melee members of their team. I think for Team Queso, it was just about sowing those seeds of disarray, like saying, okay, navigate this basically. And if you can't, then you have people getting isolated, people being locked up, and that's where the people, like Joey is going to shine. And that's where Andre is going to shine because that's exactly what they want. You've got to remember that Kha'Zix thrives off Discord. Like, Kha'Zix is a champion that shouldn't work well in team fights. By all accounts, Kha'Zix is designed from a champion design point to not work well in team fights. But the real world of it is that team fights are not harmonious most of the time. They are quite discordant, and that's where, you know, someone like Kha'Zix is going to be able to jump in and do his work. But, you know, I think you can see just from the stats alone how everybody had a part to play. Vejos and Acolyte as well, specifically those solo learners who usually get a little overlooked in lieu of Andre, really, you know, popped off in this game. And I think both did incredibly well.
Acolyte, I want to come back to this if we see another Wukong. Acolyte going Hull Breaker, but then team fighting. I don't know how I feel about that. But the one pickup that did really work for them, and I wasn't really thinking about this interaction until we were watching the replays, is like, he picks up Proto Belt, and there's one fight where he like dash Proto Belt flashes ults. You clear so much distance basically while stealthed as well. So like you just basically end up with this Wukong on top of you, and like what can you even do in those chokes? That really is the biggest thing that they struggled with. And this was a really close game up until about that 8-minute mark, and then suddenly Team Queso were like, oh, okay, this is how we play our comp out, and they actually can't do anything against it. So really solid performance. I think Vejos quietly got 6 kills in that game and ended really strong. So that game looked rough in the early game for Queso, and I think that's where Formulation probably need to pick a comp that can play around those early skirmishes a little less into the hands of Team Queso. Let's take a look at the play of the game and see where Queso took full control of this one. They're 1-0 in this series, and this is one of the moments that made it happen.
Yeah, I like, this is the one that you were talking about, was the Proto Belt reach of that Wukong ultimate. I think one of the things that really was almost the tipping point for Team Queso was they realized that actually they don't need to sort of play away from this formulation comp. They have the capabilities and the tools necessary to team fight them on their own terms. And, you know, when they finally had Acolyte making these engages and Acolyte joining the fight, just how different it was in terms of how they were able to take over the game. You know, that Hull Breaker maybe clearly spoke to an indication that Wukong's very strong with his first ability at taking towers, and they were hoping that maybe that would give them an alternative win condition. But you don't need to. You can just bring him in and make him do what he does best.
Have him team fight and just try and crush through. I mean, that was a solid performance in game 1 from Team Queso. We'll see whether they can 2-0 Formulation, or whether Formulation will find their team fight footing that we've come to expect from them as we head into game 2. We'll be back in just a few minutes to take us into our second game of the day.
You ready?
Welcome back, everybody, to the WREC. It is the last chance qualifiers and the last day of our broadcast of the online portion. We're all gearing up for our finals event in Barcelona a couple of weeks from now, a while from now. So we've got a long way before we get there. Still got 2 series to go. We are in our first series of the day between Queso and Formulation. This is to determine who will immediately then face WREC to end the day. So long day potentially. And Queso are 1-0. So they'll be looking to just 2-0 their way through this series and take on WREC later on. They look pretty good in game 1. I think this is mostly just like draft allowing them to play well around what formulation we're going to do rather than Queso doing anything spectacular.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned it, and correctly nailed it, I think that realistically there was those 2 early picks in the draft for Queso that very much were strong into heavy melee comps. And I think, when it comes to team fights, it's just about using that Wukong ultimate at the right time to give that space over to Joey and over to Andre, which they're able to do. Which begs the question as to why Formulation then, kind of drilled their nose into it and did the same thing that they were planning on doing from the start. And that maybe that lends itself to that discussion point about the flexibility of Formulation, and maybe they're not quite as flexible as maybe they want to be. So I think we'll have to take a look at this next draft and see if they are adjusting, if they are changing their style, or if they aren't, then why? Because obviously we saw a super early rotation of Leona, which, as you very, very correctly mentioned, not many other teams see the high value in Leona, and I think probably for good reason right now. There is if you want to play engaged supports, people are playing Thresh and people are playing Alistair. Although Leona does offer more single target lockdown and has a very, very low cooldown, strong ultimate, I think a lot of people are still yet to see the high value in Leona pretty much every game. But hey, we'll see. Formulation have got another game, potentially 2, to turn it around here. So
that's fair. Let's see if Stuart values the Leona. Are you a Leona enjoyer, Stuart? Let's hear your key points, and I want you to throw an answer to that in before you start it as well.
Unfortunately, I'm not a Leona enjoyer. I didn't really enjoy it too much, to be fair. The early game was very, very scrappy. It was mainly to do with Zaura and them early game roams on Leona. But the most important thing for Team Queso is that they didn't really fall too far behind in the early game. I feel like if Formulation did get that early game lead with the roams, they were able to excel at that goal lead and be able to just do well in the team fights. But the problem with Formulation is that they didn't really have enough damage to break through that big front line of Team Queso. We saw the last pick Garen for Veos in the mid lane, when you have Galio as well on top of that, and Wukong. The Ziggs didn't really do that much damage at all, and it's really hard for a Ziggs to break through these big, massive tanks. So it was a really, really clever draft by Team Queso in general, and it was just really, really hard for Formulation to kind of do anything when they got to the mid and late game and once Garen got 2 or 3 items. But now Formulation are on their last legs. I'm hoping to get a pocket pick out of them. We've seen some, misfortunes from Fekko in the duo lane, Galio as well. We've seen some really, really interesting picks for Formulation. Maybe they're going to be having something else up their sleeve for this second game, and maybe their final game for the last chance qualifier. We'll have to see. Back to the Strasnik Scandal.
Thank you, Stuart. And that was just a test to see whether you're paying attention to us. The number of segments I've done where I've just zoned out right before and somebody's asked me a question and I'm like, no idea.
Segments? I just do that all the time.
I wondered why you were complimenting me on being correct. I was like, surely he's not listening to what I'm saying. This is... Nevertheless, I'm hoping that the Formulation have something that's at least different from what we've seen. I don't need it to be anything out of the box wild, but I feel like they've been reluctant to go towards the crit 80 carries we've seen from a few of the other teams, or something that can have a little difference. I feel like they've played a lot of Ziggs recently, and those kind of mages that play for later in the game, and teams have started to figure that out.
Yeah, I think also when you look at the Formulation gaming comp from last game, they were hoping that they would be able to engage and sequentially knock out people from Queso very quickly. You had a lot of bursts from AP Gragas. Leona's designed to be bursting on a single target champion. I think that their game plan was everybody focus one target, Then we move from target to target to target with the support of artillery Ziggs in the background, which just obviously in the end didn't work. They weren't quite able to get that burst rolling as quickly as they would have liked. And I think also the problem with Ziggs is that as a one-man army in the back line, I don't think strong enough, to do it all himself all the time. Like he's obviously going to output a lot of damage. Ziggs always does. It's just natural with Ziggs. But just as a one-man army, maybe not strong enough in the current meta to sort of be able to manage that.
That's a fair point. Queso now on the blue side. We're going to run through the bans quickly, and I want to actually return to your point. So Aurelia, Corki banned away on the side of Team Queso. Olaf, Karma taken out. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Kha'Zix ban, because one thing I think Queso did really well last game, because of the composition where 4 go forward, Ziggs goes back, is that gives Kha'Zix immediate isolation onto your primary carry there. And we saw a few fights where Fekko was just like, nope, can't survive through that. It's Queso that actually banned out the Kha'Zix. That's not the ban direction I was expecting Kha'Zix to be taken out.
I completely agree with you. I think it's very odd that that Queso would actually do that on Blue's side, unless they're expecting Kimao to potentially try and take a first rotation Kha'Zix when they were not going to first rotate the Kha'Zix. But nonetheless, that's the Jax that goes down here.
Camille,
the formulation,
right?
which has left open a lot of strong picks like Camille, as you mentioned, also the Fiora, which is something that both Andre and Acolyte do like to play. But Camille, to me, strikes me as the more obvious choice in this scenario, especially because it is something that Acolyte is so proficient with, and I think it is the one that's going to come through.
Now we get the answer of Gragas plus something else from formulation. I'm not expecting the Leona to be as high priority as she was in the last game. And I wouldn't want them to go Gragas Ziggs here. I would kind of maybe even prefer like a Gragas Varus if you want to go towards like the Varus Ziggs meta. But I think there are a lot of options that you can actually wait on your duo lane for your carry there if you wanted to.
I like the Galio because it removes the Galio Camille combination, which is very strong. As you mentioned, I do like Gragas into Camille. It's a good way of dealing with Camille's ultimate a lot of the time. It will already tip you a little AP heavy.
Yeah,
with the Galio and the Gragas in that rotation, so therefore it would mean that you would very likely need to have some kind of AD influence. But it's going to be the Fiora that gets locked in here. Now that's something that Don has played more often than not in the mid lane, but it is something that can be flexed across those other two roles. It really just depends on the matchup. Vejos is going to get his hands on the Akali. This one is open for him, and we've seen the kind of impact that Vejos can have on Akali, and he's happy to lock that in, having seen the Fiora already. The only problem that you do have to worry about is that Galio is a relatively good answer into Akali, but Joey's going to go for a Varus.
Yeah, Varus picked up for the bottom lane. I think here you got just a lot of skirmish potential in the early game between Akali, Varus, the Camille coming in as well. Both teams opting away from the Gragas to begin this draft out. Not too surprising with the priority of where they've gone. But now we see Deformulation prioritize their bottom lane before they have a bunch banned out. I mean, if they want to play AP, then it's going to be the likes of Ziggs, Orianna. They're actually going to opt into a strong jungle matchup. And again, try and force Andre into a disadvantageous matchup. There are so many jungle picks he has pulled out, though, that I don't know how possible that is to do.
I think, Lee Sin going down so very early on is, especially with the Fiora having been taken away, you are, I think, limiting. But Gragas is the ban that I would have gone for. I think Gragas is a good answer into Lee Sin. So I think, for this circumstance, I think that's fine. Trying to think what else would be good for Andre in this situation. Olaf is gone, Jax is gone, Gragas is now gone, Fiora's gone. He could go Camille, of course.
Like Xin Zhao and Riven are picks that we've seen Andre pick at certain times when his primary carries are not available. Zin's off, so now we're like Riven, Jarvan if he wants it, but we've seen a lot of Jarvans fail the last couple of days.
Yes, we have. I think Zin being banned is a good option. I think they are realizing that at this point they're trying to target the jungle out as much as physically possible. And this is where you just see, Andre say, "Well, give me Camille jungle and we'll let Acolyte run with Darius," which I think would work fine. By the way, if I were Team Queso, I'd even be tempted to say 3 melees. That sounds like Darius territory, and then just like locking a Darius for Team Queso, depending on what formulation pick at this point. I think I think people forget that Camille is still a very viable and relatively decent. And I think formulation probably read it.
Yeah.
I think formulation probably read it. They saw that the switcheroo was very possible from Team Queso's standpoint, and that the Darius would be the answer. So I commend them, but they are also now pretty like melee heavy on the formulation side. And so for Team Queso, it's about what we can do to kind of give something that can deal with heavy melee comps like this.
At this point, you got a lot of AD, so do you still opt towards a mage in the bottom lane? There's not that many available. I mean, Orianna would be the one that I would be looking for now with the Ziggs ban, the Morgana ban. I mean, we have the likes of Brand and Vega that are on the fringe.
Are you talking about formulation, right, for a final?
For Fekko, yeah. Fekko's last pick.
Honestly, I'd almost be tempted to say Seraphine.
Oh, true.
Personally, I would be tempted to say Seraphine if they could just given the comp that I'm seeing from formulation. With Team Queso, Rengar.
Ooh, we saw a Rengar yesterday. I wasn't sold on the Rengar yesterday. It kind of fell off really quickly. It got 2 kills to start, and then if I remember, just like kind of petered away and didn't do too much. So it's really on Queso to get this Rengar ahead and keep him ahead, because Rengar doesn't do anything once you're out of a pick phase of the game. He can't really contest objectives too well. He can't team fight. Right? Yeah. And there is the Seraphine. You saw it coming, and I'm sure so did Team Queso. Seraphine screws up Rengar pretty badly as well. Like, if Rengar doesn't immediately get the kill, the team fight's done. Like, I
think Seraphine screws up a lot of this team, honestly. It screws up the Rakan, it screws up the Camille in a sense. It makes Akali's life a little harder. I think it was a sensible pick. I think the formulation actually read the end of the draft really well. They read that the likely pick for Acolyte was going to be Darius. They'd switch through the Camille into the jungle, and then they read that and they forced into a Rakan, which we know Rakan's great, but then the Seraphine was just the perfect addition to this comp. And I think, you know, I promise you I don't have an earpiece into formulation. I'm not drafting their drafts on the fly. But I think like it just made sense. You've got a lot of melee. My thinking process was you've just got a lot of melee to balance your ult off. It's the perfect protect the Seraphine style comp, and it just made sense for formulation. And
actually, I feel like on paper, Galio and Seraphine counter 4 of the champions that Team Queso have picked. Like, Camille jumps in, Akali jumps in, Rengar jumps in, Rakan jumps in. Immediately you get taunted. You can't have the impact on the team fight that you want. Seraphine follows it up with her charm on top of it, and suddenly Darius is just going to start ulting people and spinning through a fight. And theoretically, I think Formulation's team fight is so much stronger than Team Queso's. Now, what Team Queso can do is, if they can get picks individually and avoid fights, that would be the way that they could end up utilizing this composition. But it's a Rengar again. We've started to see it filter into the meta when we have so many jungle bans and takeaways. We'll have to see whether Andre can do it, because this is a very linear champion that if you do not snowball, you will not have any impact on the game.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Rengar is one of those champs that does not feel particularly strong when playing from behind. And especially into Lee Sin as well. Like, it's a tough matchup. You've got to be careful about the way that you play your early game. You can see that Don and Zawa are just looking to at least get eyes on Andre at this stage to make sure that they can keep abreast of where he's at.
Yeah, they got the sweeper, the plant go through, and it actually forced Queso to kind of react and move back out of the lane, give away some of the lane presence that you might have expected them to have. Taunt comes through, a lot of damage down onto Methanol to start this one off. Methanol stays in place, keeps himself there and forced to flash out. Gonna back away and save that honey fruit for another day. But, I mean, Fekko might just be able to connect with his abilities here and make sure that Methanol doesn't stay in lane. However, look at the damage back from Joey. If he can hit level 2 here, doesn't actually save the charge on Piercing Arrow. That's always a dangerous spot in lane when you're low health and Varus is about to get access potentially to his empowered ability 1. That's always a bad day for a laner against Varus.
Absolutely. I think, Varus in this particular matchup as well should be able to eventually start to be a little more aggressive and take over. Methanol is still level 1, by the way. Doesn't have that flash available, so...
This is a bad situation. It's first blood going over to Formulation, and with Methanol on the back foot, that also slows down what Andre can do. They need those early game skirmishes to be as impactful as possible, and it's not going to happen with 0-1 Methanol now. Only level 2 still.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what Methanol thought he was getting by roaming at level 1 in that scenario. I know it's the playbook. I know that you roam out of lane relatively early as a support to try and help provide some mid lane priority to ensure that the river scuttlers go your way, but it just felt a little bit misguided in terms of where we are, because I just think that level 1, even though you do have the engage potential, you don't have the Oh, Joey snipes him away. He's got the ult as well.
Oh, that's why you can't afford to stay in lane on low health against the Varus. I mean, Feko dropped back but couldn't clear the distance. Piercing Arrow picks up the kill. I think Kamau's going immediately into mid lane for a gank here as Don. He has to know that it's a bait with Don being so low, and Veos has the ultimate too, but he's just going to back away from this. Oh, Don is playing this so incredibly aggressively against an Akali. Wow.
Yeah, he really is. He's just sort of hoping that you'll have the support of both Zawa and Kemal. You can see Andre now working his way up towards the top side of the map. He's popped that ultimate.
Yeah, gonna jump in, meets the barrier. That's a good attempt from UI to outplay, and it's bought enough time for Zawa to keep Andre in place. He's away from the tower, but he's not away from the danger as Kemal picks up another kill. This Rengar is not finding the impact that they need in the early game.
This is the one problem with Rengar ganks, especially post 5. It is so telegraphed when it happens. It gives the enemy a little bit of time to react. I mean, UI knew exactly what was going on there. So did Zawa and Kemal, who both rotated towards the top side of the map. It was a little bit boneheaded to try and force that through. I mean, I know Darius at half HP is juicy under his own tower, but yeah, I think you're just going to be, read the map a little bit. Make sure that when you're thinking about the plays that you're making, you're not just making them because the setup is correct. You're instead looking at how the enemies react as well. And I think the problem with Rengar, as I said, is that he just puts a big old flag above the enemy's head. Is like, I am somewhere near you and I'm going to be diving you or jumping on you in the next couple of seconds. And it just meant that formulation we're easily able to get away with it.
Double taunt lands, or at least I thought it was double. It's actually so many members of formulation that everyone stacked on top of each other made me think that there was multiple people from Queso there. It's all too easy for formulation in this early game, getting these taunts to land, utilizing the Galio, and everybody's building Sheens on the side of Queso, but that means they're just not ready to fight yet. They don't have important first items on this game, and Dragon goes over to formulation to start this out.
And they should be able to get away with it. Joey going down.
No minions here, though, is Methanauts in the top lane. UI's barrier is not up, though. That should be enough for him to survive through. No way does he get the first kill. Oh, he's not even going to die. Acolyte hasn't been able to pick it up. And now they're going to bring up Andre. They will get the kill in exchange, but that was so much longer than it should have taken. And it buys the time for Kamau to connect to the Sonic Wave. He finds it. Hextech Ultimatum is going to lock Kamau in place for a second before the Camille dies. And it's all on Joey in order to keep this game alive. Finally, perhaps we're getting the game where Joey has to be the one to carry Queso, because Queso on the top side of the map are getting dragged into fights that formulation are winning.
Oh, Joey just about managed to get up towards the top side of the map to be able to have that influence. But you're right. I mean, there is something that's going wrong on the top side of the map here with the way that they're playing into UI. Kind of just almost trying to force it through for the sake of forcing it through. You can see Acolyte just not quite able to find it. They obviously realized that they had to give up the dragon and were trying to make something happen on the top side of the map. I really love how formulation was so quick to react here, though. I think they've kind of had Queso's number in terms of where Queso want to be at any given time on the map. And I think that rotation up there, again, just stopped the initial attempt at trying to convert a dragon loss into a tower take. Zawa has to escape, so does Kemal here, but Rift Herald is definitely going to be something worth fighting over. If you can deny this from Team Queso, then you can essentially put them on the back foot in this early game.
It's funny because I get actually the flipped version of game one, where like Queso were happy with formulation needing to play into them and absorbing their engage. This feels exactly the same, but with the teams are swapped, right? Formulation are very happy with this comp to say, okay, engage on us with the Rengar that's behind already, and we'll get the taunt to land, we'll stay alive. And formulation come out ahead when it's Team Queso that are forcing these players, as you put it. Like, there's overreaches, overextension, and you can see Veos may be in trouble, dodges out on the route and doesn't get locked down. Now, here comes the play attempt. We'll see whether formulation can hold on, though, as that's already low health on Feko, not able to survive through with the Seraphine. Ultimate was available, but didn't get used. The Zhao is going to drop low. This one, they haven't been able to turn back around, and with the Rift Herald dropped in the bottom lane, this should be an attempt on the first tower of the game.
Yeah, and I think with the Rengar, it'll drop in seconds regardless. They don't need him. We first tower of the game taken, and Queso finds something back here. A little bit of an overextension from formulation. And again, when you're running with a Seraphine comp, especially into the assassination potential of a Camille, a Rengar, and an Akali, you just need to be so careful about where you choose to position. And I think that's something that maybe I neglected to talk about. I mean, look, let's talk about this first. Again, the positioning, it was just bad from Fico. He was a little too far up here. I don't think they fully knew where the rest of Team Queso were in this situation. which is fair. You know, you don't always have all the information available at all times, but I think, you know, one of the things that I maybe neglected to mention in the draft phase is just how many tools you've got at dealing with Fico. Like if Fico's the problem in these comps, like you've got a Rengar, a Camille, and an Akali, all of which can basically circumnavigate melee front lines to get in and prove a nuisance, as well as the Rakan, who has that engage potential, as we've just seen there. So, you know, I think you've got to be just a little conscious about where you are as Fico in this scenario.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. We talked a lot about if you can deny the engage, how good Seraphine can be, but if that denial doesn't happen, you know, if you get jumped on as the Seraphine, then it's a real problem. As it's going to be Acolyte that's jumped on, hookshot after the flash gets him over the wall, easy peasy. Camille, one of the hardest champions to lock down. No real sweat there, although obviously not having that flash makes it a little trickier on the second time, as UI is going to try and hold 2 in the top lane, but it's all going to be about this dragon. 4 seconds till Mountain Drake spawns, and a lot of the ultimates are available. Acolyte did just use his. I think they've gone aggressive top lane. Yeah, it's UI that was the focus, and it looks like Queso are going to sack the dragon and drop a fight in mid lane as well in order to push out the top lane, as it's Veos around the dragon. Not going to be able to dissuade Formulation from here.
No, I think Formulation will just go ahead and utilize the amount of resources they have on the bottom side of the map to secure that dragon for themselves. And I think, you know, Queso probably okay about this. I mean, one can argue the power of Cloud Dragon and the stats that back it up, but one thing that you can't argue is that Mountain has never really been seen as a huge win condition dragon. The only thing that I think you've got to have in the back of your mind here for Queso is that was just, I think, a little bit of a wild engage there from Methanol. But I think one of the things you've got to have in the back of your mind is that for Queso, you are now looking at a situation where Formulation could play towards the Elder as a potential win condition. They already have 2 dragons to make it that much more powerful. And I think for Queso, you know, you're on a timer at this point. You've got 1 more dragon. You could let that go. It is infernal, so you might not want to, but regardless, you can't let all of them go.
You know what? This game started out not great for Andre, and he's 4-1 with now the Death Stance as well completed and Stasis. So he's going to jump into the fight and then last a surprisingly long time, I feel, if they get that first kill for the you know, the health to come back from Death Stance. So a little bit different, and this is a bit more of what we saw from Queso yesterday. Is that's a kick on Veos is going to keep him at least out of the shroud for a moment and allow Formulation to pick that up. Yesterday against Team Dark in the second game, I think it was Queso ended up falling behind, but then very quickly just turned things around, figured out their composition, how to fight with it, and turned the game on its head, taking 2-0. Now Methanol has to be careful. He's going to get caught a little bit, tries to go in aggressively. Galio ultimate is going to knock up 2. In goes the rest of the fight as Joey seems to be safe over the wall, but look, the damage is just not there from Queso to start this one out, and it's Acolyte that has fallen with Veos not there either on that Akali, just not enough in the tank to take out Formulation around this Rift.
I think then they realized that once they dropped Acolyte in this fight, there was no real way that Queso were going to get in and contest this Rift Herald, and so they just back off at the end of the day. I think also Vejos just getting caught out means there is less assassination potential, less assassination threat on to Fico, and they can't really navigate the fights the way they want to without Vejos. So there'll be Formulation that bounced back after a couple of awkward tower losses, put themselves at a really comfortable gold lead of about 2,000 at 10 minutes into the game, which is a nice place to be if you're Formulation. And you can see the comp working the way it's supposed to, which is great.
Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. Now it's UI getting dived in the bottom lane. There's no tower there, though, so UI can't really kite back to it. He's needing to buy time for his teammates. Andre drops low, does have the stasis available. That's the rampage to go, and uses the ultimate on the back end of the fight and gets a double kill for himself. Still has the survivability. Stasis popped in order to get back out of this. There's a stasis on Kimau. It's going to drop into a GA as well. That's a kill going over to Acolyte. Is now back from the GA comes Kimau, safeguards his way. That's a good taunt on 4, but Veos is pushed in the middle lane at the same time, and Team Queso get a lot from this fight. They take a lot of objectives, a lot of summoner spells and item usage as well, with those stasis being down.
No kidding. What a fight from Team Queso there, like microing absolutely perfectly. You can see that UI, it's one of the things about Darius, pop that stone plate enchant, you buy a lot of time for yourself to build those stacks up, which is why people love this enchant on Darius. You know, the 2 main ones obviously being the proto belt for the engage and that. Trying to buy time to get the stacks up onto Andre, not quite able to, and as you mentioned, brilliant stasis from Andre, perfectly timed it to draw Don in whilst you could see that Kemal was unable to unable to help, being in his own stasis. Then Kemal drops obviously out of the GA, and Fico is a little too late to the party. And I think that's the problem with the formulation composition. You really do require Fico there from the very get-go, because the kind of like the disruption that he sows with his ultimate, it allows Don, Kemal, and UI to get the necessary pre-work in the team fights to be able to start finding those kills. And I think if you have Fico turning up to these fights later, that's where you're going to run into an issue.
I posed this question yesterday. What the hell have teams got to do to get Andre out of a game? We had like 7 jungle bans. He's on a non-standard jungler who requires snowballing, dies in the early game. He's 6-1 on this fight now, on this game. Like, how much attention do you have to pay this guy before Team Queso are really rocked by a lot of these teams? I would love to see a potential showdown with, Gamelord and Rix, and maybe we'll see it in Barcelona. We may still see it today with Team Queso if they're able to close this out. Of course, the winner will immediately face Rix after this series in a best of 3. So Team Queso 1 win away from that, but Andre has looked so incredibly good this past week, and now he's going to look for the steal. Can he get the timing? He has the ward there. In they go for the fight. He's found Don on the backline, but there's not enough damage to follow it up as Methanaut's going to be forced out of the fight. This looks to be going more Formulation's way at first, but Joey puts the damage out. The jungler is already down for Formulation, and that means it's time for Feos to rip through the backline with a double kill for himself. Everything Team Queso needed from that. It looked so good at the beginning for Formulation, but Team Queso only lose 2, and they're going to go for the Baron.
Yeah, they say, screw the Infernal, let's go straight for Baron. We have a Rengar. This will drop so quickly. Blade of the Ruined King Camille as well. Second item, Blade of the Ruined King for Acolyte. And this is going to be a very quick Baron turnaround, almost so quick that they can get back to base and on the board, ready to fight for this Infernal very quickly, which is what I think they are going to do. Take a look at this fight again. You can see, you correctly mentioned, not the great start. I mean, essentially, Andre blew his burst on a Fiora riposte. Well-timed stasis to buy a bit of time whilst Fico was doing his best to sort of disrupt the team fight to allow his frontliners to get the work done. But I think one of the things that wasn't really caught on camera at the start of the fight was how Vejos kind of wriggled his way into the backline to threaten that Seraphine. And once Seraphine's down, again, kind of ruins this Formulation Gaming comp. Acolyte's in.
Yeah, back into the lineup. But Fico drops immediately, and this is just all too easy for Team Queso. This has been a close game, but no longer. It's the second ace in a row, back to back. This time it's clean, and that's a legendary performance from Andre. He was forced out of the jungle to begin this one. Queso are about to 2-0 Formulation.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very, very quick push with the Baron right now. They've got time. They have the Rengar as well. I think this is going to be 2-0. I think Team Queso have done it.
Team Queso have indeed done it. Team Queso are going to 2-0 their way past Formulation. They're going for a showdown with Rix. It is a rematch from Origin series of last year, looking for the group stage spot. Team Queso have advanced. They're going to face the finals against Rix. I mean, that is a very enjoyable matchup that I'm looking forward to seeing. And Queso, they've been on the upswing as well. It's been a great performance from them the last couple of days.
Yeah, and I think, I maybe underestimated how much Queso have been able to grow and adapt even over the course of this tournament. And I think that clearly shows that, even when you're trying to force Andre out of the fight, out of the game, he's still able to make himself felt in terms of presence. And I think as well, one of the things that proved so good in this game was how many tools they had at putting pressure on Fico. I think one of the things that has been able to happen for Formulation Gaming with these comps in the past is that no one really plays that many assassins. So Fico, which is very comfortably able to sort of play artillery Seraphine from the backline. Not the case versus Team Queso. Andre, a big big assassin player. He plays the Kha'Zixes. You can now obviously see playing the Rengar. You have Vejos, known for his Akali, and obviously Acolyte getting to play the Camille with that single target lockdown necessary to make those picks onto the Seraphine in the backline. And I think, in this particular circumstance, it was just Team Queso drafting both games in a way that dealt with the main threats from Formulation Gaming. And I think that's one thing that we should really sort of point back towards, is just how good these Queso drafts have been, despite the pressures that have been on them in draft. They've been able to create things that have very adequately dealt with the answers that the questions that Formulation Gaming have thrown out.
Yeah, and I felt like coming out of the draft, it felt almost like it was formulation that had like the draft that figured out the way Queso were trying to play. But I think as you brought up in the middle of the game, like there are too many threats on that Seraphine that, yes, okay, there's the big taunt, there's like a bunch of crowd control that formulation can use, but it just is hard to layer. It's not these perfect team fights where everything happens in a sequential order. So formulation just kind of gets split apart. Queso come in, take him down, and for a game that started 0-1 for Andre, 9-1 to end the game is exactly what we've come to expect. That Team Queso, even when challenged right now against a lot of the teams in the last chance qualifier, they've been able to bounce back, steady themselves really well in the middle of a game, which is difficult. We see teams fall apart all the time from a bad beginning, to be able to put out a performance like this. And it's really a good mark of the fact that Queso have been putting in the practice as well. And we can definitely see it starting to pay off. We've heard from Elke a couple of times that they really they're not at a perfect spot yet, but they're starting to get themselves on that upswing and starting to peak at the right time.
Yeah, and I think you're going to need to, you need to bring peak game versus Rix at the end of the day. Like, this is a team that has clearly flourished on the 3.1 meta. They're in a situation where they are playing exactly the type of Wild Rift that they want to. This is the point where you do need to kind of peak, to bring your best, to bring your A game. They did that in the Origin series last year. They need to do that again now. We'll be able to re-meet, obviously, at the live finals in Barcelona, but they will need to... They really need to do it again now to ensure that they are setting the right message heading into those finals next month.
Yeah, it's a really interesting matchup that we have coming up shortly. I mean, now Team Queso basically just need to stay in the zone. They've just come back from what was a rough early game. If they can kind of steady themselves, I'm sure that they've done prep expecting to get through this first series. Double best of series are always tough. I was privy to a lot of discussions on Mad Lions when we were doing double best ofs in like the Gauntlet, and when it's back to back and you have to prepare for multiple opponents. So you always have at least a tiny bit of your planning going towards the next series, whereas Rix had to plan for two teams as well. So really interesting setup now as we head towards our second series of the day. Let's check out the play of the game from this second game. Team Queso had to fight to bounce back into this one, but they managed to find the Seraphine time and time again.
Yeah, and I think this is the right fight. I mean, really keep your eyes on Vejos here. Like, hasn't done anything, flashes over. Fico knows he's dead because he's flashed towards the fight to try and at least have an impact. But it's just Vejos. I mean, he did his job. He knew exactly what he needed to do. The only thing that mattered in this fight was how quickly and how easily you could dispose of the Seraphine. Never mind what happened in the rest of the fight. Once that Seraphine's down, it unlocks formulation. It makes it much easier to deal with the rest of those frontliners because there's nothing left to support them. And I think Vejos just knew exactly where Seraphine was. He placed his flash correctly and did his job. And I think that, that was just the only person you really needed to care about in that fight.
Yeah, it was exactly what Queso needed to do. And as we said, we've seen them have these turnarounds in game very quickly, which is a moniker of a team that are very comfortable in the way that they need to play. So normally we would have an interview, but because Queso are getting ready right away for a matchup against Rix, we are not going to interrupt their preparation. I think that would not exactly be a welcome thing from the side of Queso. So we're going to immediately crown our MVP. And normally at this point, we're bigging up Andre and saying how Queso played towards him. It's not that Andre had a bad series at all. He still did a lot of work, but I think compared to what we normally expect from Queso, Vejos actually stepped up. Game 1 was good on the Garen. Game 2, that Akali found those all-important fights.
Yeah, I think Vejos had a really, really solid series. I think did his job admirably when he needed to in both games. And I think that is something that, he facilitated the rest of the team. He was the key part of how they managed both of these team comps, especially in that game on Akali where, he was just able to be so impactful in almost every team fight situation. You can see the kill screen that came up there, killing off Fico time and time again. That's exactly what he needed to do. And he never floundered when it came to these team fight situations.
Yeah, really good performance out of Vejos. They're going to need to continue that because Snitch has looked very good on the side of Rix these last couple of games that we've seen. So it is going to be one heck of a showdown, although we're going to have to find out from Origin Series to finals of the open bracket. Rix, is this your time to be the bride and not always the bridesmaid? Because it's another finals for Rix. Queso taking on Rix in the last chance qualifier finals when we come back in just a few minutes.